My name is Kelsey. I'm 26 years old now, but the first time my sister pressed a hot curling iron into my back, I was only 12. I still remember the hiss, the smell of burning skin, and the silence afterward. No apology, no panic, just my mother's cold voice from the other room telling me to stop screaming like a stray dog. That burn left a scar beneath my shoulder blade, but it was nothing compared to the damage done inside me. See, in my house, pain wasn't punished. It was expected. And love had rules, and I never made the cut. But what they didn't know back then was this: every time they tried to burn me down, they were forging something stronger. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you watching from and how old are you? And don't forget to subscribe to Subtle Revenge Stories for more powerful journeys like this one. The first time Olivia burned me, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't a game gone wrong or a moment of sibling playfulness. I was 12 years old, barefoot on the tile floor of our cramped hallway when she came up behind me with that curling iron already hot and hissing. I didn't even see it coming. One second I was folding laundry like Mom told me, the next there was a scream so loud it cut through the neighborhood. Mine. My body arched in pain. I dropped the towel. My hands reached instinctively for the searing heat radiating across my back. The pain was so sharp, so immediate, I couldn't form words. I remember the smell, flesh and plastic, and something chemical that clung to the air. I thought for a moment that help was coming. The neighbors banged on the door. They'd heard me. Someone called the police. I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would finally see what was happening inside those walls. But when the officers showed up, my mother greeted them with a sad, tired smile and a lit cigarette. "She's just having a tantrum," she said. I told her she couldn't go to the park with her friends, and she lost it. She does that. They left. They always left. And I didn't. I sat on the floor, trembling, biting back the tears, because I'd already learned tears didn't help. My mother didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't even look at the burn blistering across my skin. From the kitchen, her voice floated out like smoke. "Clean that up before your father gets home. And stop screaming like some stray." That's the part that never left me, not the burn, not even the smell. It was the silence. The absolute void of concern. I remember wondering if I was invisible. If pain only counted when Olivia felt it. If bruises only mattered when they were on someone else. And I remember thinking, this isn't home. This is a war zone, and I'm not the soldier. I'm the target. Back then, I still wanted to believe I could earn their love. That if I did the dishes just right, or got better grades, maybe Mom would hug me instead of shrug. Maybe Olivia would stop glaring at me like I was a disease she couldn't shake. But that day, that first burn, it changed something. It whispered a truth into the raw skin on my back. No one was coming to save me. Have you ever felt that kind of silence? The kind that follows pain, not out of peace, but out of permission? Have you ever been told your suffering was too loud, that your hurt was an inconvenience? Tell me in the comments, because I think more of us have lived this than we dare admit. Olivia was everything I wasn't. Blonde, blue-eyed cheer captain by sophomore year, she walked through life like it owed her applause. She had this laugh, sharp and hollow like a wine glass tapped too hard. Everyone heard it, everyone responded. Teachers gave her extensions without her asking. Neighbors smiled wider when she passed by. At home, she had Mom's smirk and Dad's temper, only without the restraint. Where I was silence, Olivia was spotlight. She didn't have to earn love, she inherited it. When Olivia shoved me broke, my things called me names, my parents said I must have provoked her. When she skipped curfew, I was asked why I didn't stop her. When she shoplifted lip gloss from the pharmacy, they grounded me for not being a better influence. And when I protested, Mom would sigh, light another cigarette, and say I was just jealous. There was this look my father used to give me, quiet, tired, like I was an interruption to whatever peace he imagined he had. When Olivia threw a chair at me at 14 and chipped my tooth, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't even ask if I was hurt. He just looked at me like I should have ducked faster. That's what stuck with me. Not the pain, not even the chipped enamel. Just that look. Like I was a nuisance. Olivia knew it too. She wore her power like perfume. She could slam doors, break glasses, scream until her throat gave out. And somehow I was always the problem. I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. I learned early that if I wanted peace, I had to disappear. So I became quiet. I folded into myself. I learned how to walk through the house like a shadow. But even shadows aren't safe when someone wants to hunt them. There were nights when I would lie awake listening to Olivia's laughter from the hallway, loud and unafraid. I'd press my hands to my ears not to block out the noise, but to muffle the envy. I didn't want to be her. I just wanted to be seen like her, loved like her. But love in our house wasn't something you gave freely. It was currency, and I never had enough to buy it. People outside thought we were the perfect family. Holiday cards with matching sweaters. Olivia front and center. Me in the corner always a step behind. No one asked why I smiled like it hurt. No one noticed the way I flinched when someone reached too fast. We were polished on the outside, poisoned on the inside. Have you ever been in a family where someone else's light was used to cast a shadow over you? Where the golden child could do no wrong and you were just the echo no one listened to. If that rings true for you, tell me. Not for me, for you. Because silence might keep the peace, but it also buries the truth. I was 14 when Olivia threw the chair. It wasn't a dining chair or something light. It was the kind we used in the basement, solid wood, thick legs, no cushion. I don't remember what I said that triggered her. Maybe I looked at her too long. Maybe I rolled my eyes. Maybe I existed. That alone seemed to offend her enough. I just remember the sudden movement, the scraping of wood against tile, and the sharp crack against my face. Pain bloomed instantly, hot and metallic. My mouth filled with the taste of blood. I ran to the mirror, and that's when I saw it, my front tooth chipped like cracked porcelain, the jagged edge cutting into my tongue with every breath. I cried. Not loud, not wild, just a stunned, broken sound. I was still holding my mouth when Mom walked in. She didn't gasp. She didn't even raise her voice. She just lit her cigarette, sat at the kitchen table, and said, "You do talk back a lot." That was her judgment, her verdict, her parenting. A shrug and a side comment, as if the problem wasn't that Olivia assaulted me, but that I hadn't learned to stay silent. Dad walked in a few minutes later, and I turned toward him instinctively. Maybe he'd notice. Maybe he'd say something. Instead, he looked at Olivia, then at me, then shook his head slowly like he was disappointed. Not in what had happened, but in the fact that I hadn't ducked fast enough. I held my broken tooth in my hand, wrapped in tissue, like it might mean something. Like maybe showing them the evidence would matter. But it didn't. No one asked if I was okay. No one offered to take me to the dentist. I ended up swallowing that chipped edge every time I smiled, hiding it from the world and from myself. I saved up babysitting money for months and paid for the repair on my own. Quietly, secretly. Like I'd caused the damage. That's the thing about living in a house where harm is normalized. You begin to believe you deserve it. You think, maybe I was too loud. Maybe I was too mouthy. Maybe if I just kept quiet, she wouldn't have thrown it. But it doesn't stop there. That kind of thinking follows you. Into friendships, into relationships, into the way you talk to yourself when no one's listening. Even now when I smile, I sometimes run my tongue along that tooth. It's smooth now, polished, fixed. But I remember what it used to feel like, sharp, uneven, broken. Just like the people who put it there. Have you ever been blamed for being hurt? Made to feel like the pain you carried was your fault? If so, you're not alone. I see you. And I promise, your pain isn't a punishment. It's a wound. And wounds deserve healing, not silence. I hadn't stepped foot in that house since I turned 19. The last time I stood in that hallway, I had blood running down my forehead after Olivia slammed my head into the bathroom mirror over a bottle of shampoo. She said I'd stolen it. It was a generic brand I bought with my own money. But facts never mattered in that house, only narratives. And Olivia's voice always told the story. Mom wiped the blood from the floor, not my face, and muttered, "You're such a show-off. Look at this mess." Dad didn't even glance at me. He just asked, did it get in the grout? So when I left at 19, I left for good. No holidays, no birthdays, no check-ins. I built my life on silence and distance. But at 26, life finds ways to corner you. My apartment building had posted a notice fumigation. Mandatory. 3 nights. I didn't have the savings for a hotel, not with rent due and hours cut at work. My friends had family visiting, full couches, new babies. I didn't have many options. I had one. And it was the last place I ever wanted to see again. I called ahead, kept the conversation short. Just for the weekend, I said, "I won't be in the way." Mom paused long enough for me to feel small again. "Fine," she said. "You still have a toothbrush in the guest drawer. Don't touch Olivia's stuff." I packed light. 1 bag, 1 work shirt, 1 set of sleep clothes, and enough restraint to get through 72 hours. I didn't even bring shampoo. I arrived late, stayed quiet, nodded more than I spoke. Olivia wasn't home when I got there. I almost thought I'd make it through unnoticed. Mom offered no warmth, just a side glance and a muttered, "You look tired." I slept in the same room I had as a child, only now it felt smaller. The posters were gone, the walls painted beige. The bed creaked in protest when I laid down. I stared at the ceiling and counted how many seconds I could go without thinking of the past. I never got past 12. The first day passed without incident. I tiptoed. I cleaned up after myself. I smiled when spoken to, even if the words were hollow. I told myself I could do this. Just 1 weekend. Just survive. But the second night changed everything. Have you ever returned to a place hoping it had changed, only to realize it's you who changed? And that's why you no longer fit. Have you ever swallowed your pride, only to feel it burn in your chest like regret? That house hadn't changed. The walls still remembered every scream. And Olivia, she was just waiting for her moment. I didn't know it yet, but by the end of that night, I'd carry a burn worse than any scar, and a truth so sharp it would slice through every lie they'd ever told. It happened in the laundry room, a place that had once smelled like warm cotton and detergent, but now felt like a trap with no exit. I was ironing my only decent work shirt, white-buttoned professional, because even in survival I still tried to look put together. The house was mostly quiet, just the low hum of the dryer and the hiss of steam rising from the iron. I kept my head down, focused, telling myself again and again, almost done. 1 more night. Then I heard footsteps, unsteady, slurred. Olivia's. She pushed the door open, wobbling slightly, hair messy, holding a half-empty wine cooler. Her eyes locked on mine with that old hatred, like I had taken something from her just by breathing. "Did I say you could touch my iron?" she asked. I didn't look up. "It's Mom's," I said calmly. "I'm just finishing up." She smiled. That cold, dangerous smile that always meant something bad was coming. "No, it's mine, like everything else in this house." "Still trying to act like you belong here," she sneered. My heart was pounding, but I stayed still. "Walk away, Olivia," I said quietly, evenly. Wrong words. In one terrifyingly fast motion, she grabbed the cord, yanked the iron from the board, and slammed it against my forearm. The heat seared instantly. A flash of white-hot pain exploded through me, and I screamed. Not a quiet gasp. No, this was primal. Raw. My knees hit the floor. The iron clattered beside me, but the burn had already settled deep into my skin like a brand. I couldn't think. I couldn't move. I clutched my arm, trying to stop the pain, but it kept coming, radiating, pulsing like my flesh was on fire. Olivia stood above me, smirking proud, as if she'd finally done what she came into this world to do. Then I heard the footsteps. Faster this time. My mother's voice. What the hell happened? She attacked me, Olivia said smoothly, her tone already practiced like it wasn't the first time she'd lied with that much ease. I tried to speak, choked on the pain. I didn't. She... My voice cracked. I was shaking my hand pressed against the sizzling wound. Mom looked at Olivia, then at me. Her eyes didn't widen. Her voice didn't rise. She just crossed her arms, sighed, and said, "That's what trash gets for existing. You deserve worse." Those words did something to me. Not just broke me, they froze me. Solidified something inside me that had always been soft. The pain in my arm was blinding, but it was nothing compared to the burn in my chest. The kind that doesn't fade. The kind that stays. Have you ever had someone look at your suffering and tell you it's your fault? Have you ever watched someone love your abuser more than they ever loved you? I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I stood up. That night something ended, and something far colder began. I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't call the police. I didn't even scream again. I left the house with my burned arm wrapped in a towel, my mouth clamped shut, and my heart pounding like it might crack through my ribs. The street was cold. I walked fast, not looking back. Not because I thought they'd follow me, but because I knew they wouldn't. And somehow that hurt more. At the corner pharmacy, I paid in cash. Gauze, ointment, painkillers. I avoided eye contact with the cashier even though she recognized me. This was a small town. People always recognized you, but no one really saw you. Not when your family had spent years painting you as the problem. In the bathroom of the gas station down the street, I cleaned the burn in silence. I bit my sleeve to keep from crying out. It blistered fast, angry red, angry like me. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from clarity. I had never felt more awake in my life. I could see every memory like a slideshow flashing in my mind. Every slap, every insult, every bruise dismissed. It wasn't just the iron. It wasn't just Olivia. It was all of it. Years and years of being told I was unlovable, unworthy, unnecessary. And I realized something. If I kept waiting for justice, I would die before I ever felt it. So I made a decision. I wouldn't try to make them pay. I'd make them unravel. And I'd do it slowly, quietly, carefully. I didn't go back to my apartment. I knew they'd expect that. Instead, I took a cab to Rachel's place. She was the only one who had ever looked at Olivia and seen the venom beneath the gloss. When I showed up at her door, pale and shaking, she didn't ask me if I was overreacting. She didn't say, "Are you sure it wasn't an accident?" She saw the burn, gasped, and said, "Jesus, Kelsey." What the hell did she do? "I need your help," I said, steady for the first time in hours. Not to fix it, to flip it. That night, I slept on her couch with my arm wrapped in gauze and a storm building in my chest. Not rage, not revenge. Something deeper. Like purpose. Like fire finally finding its direction. I didn't want to fight Olivia in court. I wanted to dismantle everything she and my mother had built, the lies, the reputations, the masks they wore so easily. I wanted to show the world the truth. And I was going to do it piece by piece. Have you ever reached a point where survival wasn't enough anymore? Where you realized healing sometimes starts with taking your power back? That night, I stopped waiting to be rescued. I became the rescue. And for the first time, the burn didn't feel like the end. It felt like the spark. Rachel didn't ask for explanations. She didn't need a detailed timeline or a sworn testimony. When I lifted the gauze the next morning to check the burn, she winced. Her hands shook as she reached for the ointment. "I don't understand how someone could do this to their own sister," she whispered. I didn't answer, because that was the thing. People like Olivia didn't see me as a sister. They saw me as something in the way, something disposable. Rachel brewed coffee, pushed a warm mug into my hand, and pulled out her laptop without a word. "Let's start," she said, already opening folders. That's what she was good at, organizing chaos. And for once, it wasn't to help me tidy a resume or prepare for an interview. It was to build a case. Not for court, but for truth. I didn't want legal victories. I wanted exposure. I wanted the spotlight that had always protected Olivia to finally burn her instead. We started with my old phone. I hadn't erased anything. Out of fear, out of habit, I didn't know. But there they were, texts from Olivia calling me names, bragging about slapping me, saying things like, "Had to put the loser in her place." One message ended with a laughing emoji. I never thought a cartoon could feel like a punch in the gut. Then came the audio. I had a few voice memos recordings from behind closed doors. My mother saying, "Kelsey bruises like a peach, it's so easy to get under her skin." Her laugh echoed in that clip, low and careless. Rachel played it twice, then 3 times, her face hardening with every listen. "Jesus," she muttered. "Your mom's worse than I thought." "I told you," I said quietly. It wasn't just Olivia. Next were the photos. Scattered over the years, some taken secretly, others snapped without thinking. My shoulder with fingerprint-shaped bruises. My wrist red and raw. My jaw slightly swollen. Rachel opened each one, dragged them into a folder labeled proof, and added timestamps. Some people say trauma blurs your memory, but when you live it long enough, it becomes sharp. I could recall exact dates, the dress I wore, the smell of dinner cooking in the background, the look on Mom's face when I asked for ice and she rolled her eyes. By the end of the day, we had a wall of evidence, not just of abuse, but of patterns, of neglect, of complicity. I stared at the screen, overwhelmed by how much I had buried just to survive. And now it was all unearthed, raw, undeniable, ready. Have you ever seen your past laid out in front of you like a crime scene? Have you ever realized you were collecting proof all along, not even knowing you'd one day need it? That day, I didn't just start a plan. I started reclaiming the narrative. For once, I wasn't the quiet girl in the background. I was the witness. And soon they'd have to face what they'd tried to erase. By the 3rd day, our living room looked like a war room. Laptops opened, sticky notes on the wall, folders labeled with dates, names, and keywords. We weren't just cataloging pain, we were plotting precision. Rachel paced like a strategist, eyes scanning timelines. I sat quietly, absorbing the weight of it all, letting the old wounds turn into tools. "You said she works at that PR firm downtown, right?" Rachel asked, not looking up. "Yeah," I nodded. "She got the job a few years ago. Big firm. High-profile clients. She's proud of it. Brags about it online." Rachel clicked her tongue. "Let's find out how proud they'll be when they see what she's built her reputation on." We dove into research. The company's site showed Olivia as one of their rising stars. Photo shoots, press quotes, fake smiles plastered across every platform. But the deeper we dug, the more cracks we saw. Rumors. Whispers on staff review sites. Anonymous complaints about toxic behavior. And then I remembered something. A conversation from years ago. One of those drunken dinner arguments Mom loved to have when she was half a bottle in and feeling superior. She only got that job, Mom had said once, wineglass in hand, because I reminded the CEO's wife of that little incident on the school board. Sometimes people just need a little push. At the time, I hadn't understood. But now it clicked. Blackmail, leverage, manipulation. That's how Olivia got in. Not merit, not skill. A dirty favor from a dirtier mother. I scrolled back through old group chats. Rachel and I had once been in a shared thread back when we were still in school. There it was, one of Mom's voice notes from 5 years ago. Slurred, smug bragging about how she had the wife of that CEO by the throat over some PTA scandal. Rachel played it aloud, her eyes widening. "That's our angle," she said. "We didn't just want to shame Olivia. We wanted to sever her from the very thing she used to shield herself, her career. We wanted the company to see her for who she really was. Not just an abuser, a liability. I created a new identity, fake name, fake email, even a burner phone. Booked a consultation through the firm's contact page using Rachel's apartment address as the office for my made-up brand. I requested Olivia, specifically said I admired her boldness and presence. Said I wanted someone who understood image management. That part wasn't even a lie. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You sure you're ready to see her face again? I didn't hesitate. This time I'm not walking in as her sister. I'm walking in as her reckoning. Have you ever turned the tools they use to hurt you into weapons of truth? Have you ever felt the satisfaction of using their own games against them? This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about accountability. And Olivia. She was about to learn that masks don't hold up when the lights get bright enough. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m. I arrived 10 minutes early, dressed in a tailored navy suit borrowed from Rachel's older sister, a wig of auburn curls pinned neatly and oversized glasses perched on my nose. I didn't look like Kelsey, the forgotten girl from the back of family photos. I looked like a client. Calm. Confident. Untouchable. The receptionist greeted me and offered water. I declined. My throat was already tight, not from nerves, but from focus. This wasn't a reunion. It was an unveiling. When Olivia walked in, I saw the same smirk she'd worn since we were kids. The same entitled sway in her step heels clicking like applause she expected to follow her everywhere. She extended her hand and flashed that PR perfect smile. Hi, I'm Olivia. Thank you for requesting me personally. I shook her hand. No tremble. No blink. Of course I said voice even. Your reputation precedes you. She chuckled, tossed her ponytail completely unaware. What kind of project are you working on? I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. Before we dive into that, I'd like you to look through this. Her smile faltered slightly, but she took it. Slid one perfectly manicured nail under the seal. I watched her eyes move from page to page. First confusion, then disbelief, then the mask cracked. Her jaw tightened. Her pupils shrank. She flipped faster now, photos of bruises, screenshots of texts, transcripts of voicemail clips. My mother's voice. Olivia's own words in black and white. What is this? She demanded, voice low. Proof, I replied, of who you are when the cameras aren't rolling. She laughed nervously. I don't know who you think you are. I'm the girl you burned, I said quietly. And now I'm just returning the heat. She slammed the envelope shut, stood, and leaned across the table like she might lunge. Before she could speak, I pressed a button on my phone resting beside my coffee. Across the cafe at a table near the window, Rachel's cousin, posing as a fellow customer, lifted her phone slightly. She had recorded everything. Olivia's outburst, her aggression, her unraveling. I wouldn't do that if I were you, I said calmly. You're being watched. Olivia sat back hard, face pale now. Her mouth opened, but no words came. For the first time, I saw something I'd never seen in her before: fear. Not fear of me. Fear of exposure. Have you ever seen the moment someone realizes their power doesn't protect them anymore? That everything they built on cruelty is about to collapse? I gathered my things and stood. You'll want to call your boss, or maybe your lawyer. Either way, your image, your precious brand, it's just been redefined. I walked out, leaving the envelope behind like a calling card. This wasn't a scream in the dark. It was a whisper in daylight, and Olivia was finally hearing it. The next morning, I didn't check my email. I didn't scroll through social media or refresh any pages. I just sat at Rachel's kitchen counter sipping lukewarm coffee, my arms still wrapped beneath gauze, and waited. Not for a call, not for an apology, just for the inevitable. At 10:47 a.m. it began. Rachel's phone buzzed. She glanced down and her eyes widened. It's happening, she said, turning the screen to me. A post from Olivia's firm. A brief, sterile statement. Effective immediately, Olivia W. is no longer affiliated with our organization. We are conducting an internal investigation into recent behavioral concerns. Our firm remains committed to integrity and professionalism. No hashtags, no tags, just a digital guillotine. I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Like something had finally landed in its rightful place. By noon, the whispers had become roars. Comments under Olivia's old posts began shifting. Once filled with praise. So inspiring, boss babe. Your hustle is unmatched, now flooded with questions. Is this true? Wait, is she the one from that thread? Girl, what did you do? And then came the fallout. A small blog picked up the story, hinting at leaked evidence of workplace manipulation and personal misconduct. Then a larger account reposted the firm's statement with Olivia's headshot underneath the caption, "When your image doesn't match your reality." No names were mentioned. They didn't have to be. The internet connected the dots with surgical speed. Olivia tried to fight it. She posted a shaky video that afternoon, full makeup, poor lighting, trembling voice. "There are people out there trying to destroy me," she said, forcing tears. "This is all being twisted. It's a smear campaign. I've worked so hard, but no one bought it." The comments turned brutal. Not vile, just honest. You burned your sister and now you're crying about getting burned. She built something. You built scars. Accountability isn't cruelty. It's correction. Sponsorships pulled out. Brands she once tagged in her influencer posts issued quiet statements distancing themselves. Her agency dropped her. And just like that, the empire Olivia built on curated lies began to collapse. Not in one dramatic explosion, but in small, relentless cracks. And I watched each one form with the clarity of someone who had waited her entire life to be seen. Have you ever watched someone unravel, not because you hurt them, but because they finally had to face the hurt they caused? I didn't dance on the ashes. I didn't post a thing. I stayed silent. Because power, I'd learned, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just waits. Calm. Patient. Unshakable. Olivia wasn't the end. She was just the first chapter. Next came my mother. If Olivia was fire, my mother was ice. Cold, controlled, always calculating. Where Olivia exploded, Mom absorbed. She never yelled, never cursed. Her words sliced quietly, precise, surgical, impossible to unhear. That's what trash gets for existing. Wasn't a scream. It was a statement. A declaration. The final nail in a coffin she'd been building around me for years. But my mother didn't care about screams. She cared about appearances. And that was where I would begin. See, Mom had two great loves, her reputation in the church and her annual community fundraiser gala. Every spring, she transformed the town hall into a ballroom draped in pastels and floral centerpieces. Local papers came, photographers, pastors gave opening prayers. She stood at the podium, always in pearls, speaking of family values and the importance of nurturing the next generation. She was untouchable in that space, revered, applauded, but I knew the truth. Behind the speeches and the smiles was the same woman who once told me she regretted not putting me up for adoption, who lit her cigarette calmly while I cried in the next room, who protected Olivia at every turn because a pretty daughter with charm and social leverage fit better into her curated life than the quiet, difficult one who flinched when touched. Rachel and I circled the gala date on the calendar like a target. "This is the crown jewel," I said. "If we hit her there, everything crumbles." We began pulling footage together. Not for court, not for Facebook, but for something bigger. Something undeniable. A curated montage, photos of bruises and burns, video clips of Olivia's cruel remarks, voice recordings of my mother dismissing my pain like background noise. We edited carefully. No anger, just truth. Unfiltered, timed, and set to play without commentary. The plan wasn't to confront her. It was to expose her. Publicly. Elegantly. At the very moment she stood under the spotlight she had spent years fighting to earn. I ordered a dress online, simple, black, elegant. The kind that doesn't shout but commands. I RSVP'd, anonymously listed myself as a donor under an alias, and confirmed my attendance with a small PayPal transfer. Just enough to keep eyes off me. "Are you nervous?" Rachel asked the night before. "No," I said. "I've already lived through the worst of her. Tomorrow she lives through me." Have you ever seen someone build an entire identity on a lie? Have you ever waited for the perfect moment to show the world the truth? This wasn't about revenge. It was about reflection. I wanted them to see her. The real her. Not through my eyes, but through evidence. Through the scars that never faded. Through the silence that spoke louder than words. And soon, the very community that once applauded her would finally see what I had seen since I was a child, not a mother, but a mask. The town hall smelled like lilacs and cheap champagne. Strings of pastel lights draped from the ceiling like soft lies. Everyone was dressed to impress church elders, small business owners, community leaders. They smiled, posed for pictures, clinked glasses. And at the center of it all, like a queen overseeing her domain, stood my mother. Pearl earrings, ivory blouse, a clutch that matched her shoes. She looked flawless. She always did. I sat quietly in the back row, unnoticed, anonymous. Just another donor. My dress was simple black without pattern. I didn't smile. I didn't fidget. I watched. The host took the stage to thunderous applause, welcoming guests, praising the cause funds for youth outreach programs, meals for single mothers, scholarships for promising teens. Irony never tasted so bitter. Then came the tribute. And now the host said with a proud smile, "We'd like to honor the woman who has dedicated herself to this community with unmatched grace and generosity. Please welcome our Mother of the Year, Mrs. Elaine Winters." The room stood. Applause erupted. My mother stepped onto the stage, graceful as ever, and took the mic. "Thank you all," she began. "Family has always been at the heart of everything I do. Raising children isn't easy, but it's sacred. And I've always believed in the power of kindness, structure, and love." That was my cue. I stood, walked calmly to the side of the stage, and handed a small envelope to the host. Inside, one USB drive, labeled simply, "For the tribute." Confused, but on script, the host smiled. "It seems we have a surprise addition to tonight's program, a short video submitted anonymously in honor of honesty and resilience. Let's take a moment to reflect." The lights dimmed. The screen behind my mother flickered. And then truth arrived. A slideshow began. No music, just images, a bruised arm, a blistered shoulder, a swollen eye. All time-stamped. Then came the audio, Olivia laughing. My mother's voice saying, "She bruises like a peach. Always has. Makes it easy." The gasp from the audience was immediate. Sharp. Collective. People turned to each other. Some leaned forward. Some sat back, stunned. The final clip was just 3 seconds. My mother's voice clear and cold. "Kelsey was a mistake. I should have left her at the hospital." The screen faded to black. Silence followed. Not a polite pause, an unbreathable stillness. My mother stood frozen, smile flickering, eyes darting, lips parted with nothing to say. She clutched the microphone but didn't speak. She couldn't. The room was no longer hers. I stepped closer, leaned in so only she could hear. That's what trash gets for existing, right? Enjoy the applause now. I turned and walked away as whispers turned to murmurs, then murmurs to outrage. Have you ever watched a lie unravel in real time? Have you ever seen someone lose everything they built because the truth finally found a microphone? That night she wasn't the symbol of virtue. She was a cautionary tale. And her kingdom of performance. It crumbled without a single scream. By morning, the fallout had begun. It didn't come in the form of protests or public denouncements. It came in emails, in text messages, in silence where there used to be praise. Sponsors pulled out quietly like rats abandoning a ship that had looked pristine the night before. The local bank rescinded its donation. A florist posted online that they would no longer be affiliated with events that misrepresent the values of our community. And the church, the place where my mother had once been called a pillar. They requested a private meeting to discuss her position moving forward. Rachel forwarded me screenshots as they came in. A thread on the neighborhood Facebook group began growing. At first it was cautious. Did anyone else feel uncomfortable about that tribute video? Then braver, I always thought she seemed cold, like something was off. Then blunt. My daughter said she saw her slap that girl once behind the church. We didn't say anything at the time. I regret that now. The cracks weren't just showing, they were splitting wide open. My mother, who had once held court in every community meeting, was now a ghost. She didn't return calls. She canceled appearances. Her name, once printed in bold across fundraising brochures, had been scrubbed by noon. The gala's website was updated, her picture replaced with a generic stock image of clasped hands. The words Mother of the Year had vanished completely. She tried to salvage it. She posted a carefully worded note online, thanking the community for their patience and understanding during a difficult family misunderstanding. But no one bought it. Because the images didn't lie. The voice recordings didn't lie. And maybe, just maybe, people were tired of pretending they didn't see what was always there. Rachel looked at me across her kitchen table. "Do you feel better?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Because it wasn't about feeling better. It was about making it stop. The pretending. The performance. The power she held through fear and guilt and forced smiles. Later that week, my mother received a formal letter from the church board. They thanked her for her years of service. Then, without ceremony, they asked her to step down for a period of reflection and healing. Translation: step down quietly before we push you out loudly. Her world shrank fast. No more galas. No more Sunday committees. The phone stopped ringing. The invitations stopped arriving. The mask she wore so well had melted under the light of the truth, and what remained was a woman stripped of applause. Have you ever seen someone realize they're no longer feared, no longer respected, no longer welcome? That the power they held wasn't real, it was borrowed from the silence of others. For years, she dismissed me like I was noise. Now, the silence she gave me had become her own, and the house she used to fill with her voice and control. It was quiet now. Empty. And she had no one left to blame. I found out about the lawsuit from a mutual friend who worked part-time at the courthouse. "Your mother's name is on the docket," she said quietly. "It's for defamation." I didn't react right away. I just blinked, let the words settle. Defamation. A woman who had once called me a mistake in a voicemail was now accusing me of ruining her character. The same woman who stood silently as Olivia burned my skin, who laughed off bruises as tantrums, who taught me to whisper instead of speak, now wanted a courtroom to believe she was the victim. The papers came 2 days later. Thin, rushed, full of dramatic language and empty accusations. Emotional distress. Irreparable harm to public standing. A false narrative created by a disgruntled daughter. I almost laughed. But what hit me harder than her desperation was her arrogance. She still thought her word was gospel. She still believed that if she looked polished and sounded proper, people would forget what they saw with their own eyes. What she didn't expect was that I wouldn't hire a lawyer. I didn't need to. I had something stronger evidence. Rachel and I had compiled everything. Printed, time-stamped, cataloged. I showed up to the preliminary hearing in a black suit, clean and calm. No entourage, no cameras. Just me and a file folder full of facts. My mother walked in with Olivia beside her. Olivia wore oversized sunglasses indoors, hoping to shield herself from a world that had already moved on. My mother wore pearls, of course, and a beige blazer that screamed decorum. But beneath the surface, they both looked hollow. Not angry, not proud, just desperate. When the judge asked for opening remarks, my mother stood and cleared her throat. "My daughter is mentally unstable. She's always been difficult. This campaign of hers is not only false, it's vindictive. I have devoted my life to this community." I didn't speak. I simply opened the folder. Inside were printed transcripts of Olivia's abusive texts, audio clips of my mother minimizing my pain, photos of burns and bruises. A receipt from the pharmacy dated the night after the iron incident. Even hospital invoices I had paid out of pocket when I couldn't risk going through insurance. Then the final piece, a screenshot of a message Olivia sent me a year ago. It read, "Say one more thing and I swear I'll make you regret ever being born." The judge leaned back slowly and looked over the papers, flipping through each one in silence. Then she closed the folder and looked at my mother. "This case is dismissed," she said. "And frankly, I suggest you reconsider who's damaging whose reputation." My mother didn't speak. Olivia started to cry. Have you ever watched someone try to rewrite the story only to realize the truth had already been carved into stone? I didn't smile. I didn't thank the judge. I just stood and walked out. Because for once I wasn't defending myself. I was simply holding up a mirror. And they couldn't bear to see their own reflection. They thought the silence that followed the courtroom was the end. That I'd said my piece, gotten my justice, and moved on. But justice was never the goal. Not really. What I wanted, what I needed, was something far more enduring than a verdict. I needed to build something that couldn't be taken twisted or buried. Something that wouldn't disappear if the wind changed or the town forgot. So I called an old contact at a nonprofit I'd volunteered with in college. They worked quietly, helping victims of domestic abuse find temporary housing and legal guidance. But there was a gap, one they admitted they'd never been able to fill. People don't like to talk about family-based abuse unless it's a husband, they said. Mothers, sisters, aunts, it's harder. More invisible. More shameful. I knew that shame. Intimately. So I pitched them a new program. A division that would focus solely on survivors of intrafamily violence, especially those abused by female family members. I called it the Burn Back. The name wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. It honored the scars I carried, both the literal and the ones no doctor ever treated. To my surprise, they didn't hesitate. "We'll fund the pilot," the director said. "You run it." Within weeks, we had a small team. A quiet office space downtown. A helpline. Legal resources. And most importantly, therapy. Group and individual. Anonymous if needed. I sat in on the first session just to observe. But I couldn't stay silent. Not when a girl with tear-filled eyes said her older sister once forced her hand into boiling water for taking her shoes. Not when a middle-aged woman whispered that her mother beat her until she stopped talking for 2 years. These were my people, not by blood but by survival. 6 weeks later, I gave a public interview. My name was kept anonymous, my face blurred. But the story was unmistakable. I told it plainly. It started with an iron, I said. But the real fire was already inside me. The clip went viral. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. Thousands shared it, commented, messaged. Some said I thought I was alone. Others wrote I never had a name for what happened to me until now. Have you ever turned your pain into purpose? Have you ever looked at your worst wound and said, I can build from this? Olivia saw it, of course. She tried to strike back, made a video, fake tears, shaking voice calling me a liar. But the comments buried her. People had seen too much. The story had moved beyond us. This wasn't about a feud anymore. It was about a movement. And me, I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Because this time I wasn't trying to be heard. I was trying to hold space for all of us who were burned and never believed. And finally, we were building something no one could set fire to. I used to think survival was the finish line. That if I could just get out, just escape, I could start over. But freedom without purpose is just a different kind of silence. And I had lived in silence long enough. What started as a single file folder in Rachel's living room had become something real, something with walls and phones and late-night calls from people who had never said out loud what happened to them until they found our name online. The Burn Back wasn't a headline. It wasn't a movement with banners or slogans. It was quiet, intentional, built for those who flinched at the word home and choked when someone said family is everything. We didn't preach healing. We offered space. We didn't demand testimonies. We listened. When the interview clip aired, I didn't expect it to go far. I thought maybe a few dozen people would watch it. Maybe 1 or 2 would reach out. But within 48 hours, we had hundreds of messages. Some from women who had been silent for decades. Some from men who said they never realized what their sisters or mothers had done to them had a name. And then there were the comments from people in my own town. Quiet acknowledgements. I saw the bruises back then. I just didn't know what to say. Your story made me remember my cousin. She never came back after her mom kicked her out. The truth had always been there, but now it had a microphone. And people were listening. We expanded. A second office. A rotating team of volunteers, lawyers, therapists, advocates. I wasn't a celebrity. I wasn't a hero. I was just a girl who didn't burn quietly. And somehow that mattered. Rachel stayed by my side helping train volunteers and field calls. She once said to me, "You didn't just survive them. You outgrew them." I didn't say anything then, but I thought about it for days. Because that's what healing felt like, not forgetting, but outgrowing the cage they built for you. I started mentoring a teenager named Maya. 15. Burn scars on her forearms. She said her stepfather called them lessons. She barely spoke the first time we met, but the second time she asked, "Does it ever stop feeling like it's your fault?" I looked her in the eye and said, "It does." The moment you realize their cruelty says more about them than it ever did about you. Have you ever had someone say the words you needed 10 years ago? Have you ever seen your past reflected in someone else's pain and felt your own begin to heal? Just a little. The burnback wasn't just a name, it was a declaration. We were no longer hiding, no longer soft targets. We weren't just the ashes of what they tried to destroy. We were the fire they couldn't control. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel alone. I felt surrounded by survivors, by strength, by stories that deserved to be told. I should have known Olivia wouldn't go quietly. That was never her style. She had always performed best under pressure, smiling through lies, crying on command, bending reality until people forgot what the truth looked like. So when her name disappeared from every agency roster and brand partnership list, she did what came naturally. She turned on the camera. The video was uploaded late at night titled, "Setting the Record Straight." It was nearly 10 minutes long. She sat on her living room floor surrounded by dim lighting and candles she probably thought made her look vulnerable. Her eyes were red mascara slightly smudged just enough to appear human, not enough to seem messy. She started slow. "I've made mistakes," she said, voice trembling. "I never claimed to be perfect. But the things being said about me, they're exaggerated, twisted, taken out of context." Her bottom lip quivered. She paused, looked off camera like she was holding back more tears. "I love my family. I've always tried to protect them. I watched the whole thing not out of curiosity, but out of study. It was textbook Olivia, measured vulnerability. Just enough guilt to seem remorseful, but not enough to accept accountability. She didn't mention my name, but she didn't have to. She kept saying my sister with just the right blend of pity and subtle accusation. "She's always struggled," Olivia whispered. "And now she's using my name to rewrite her story." But this time, no one clapped. No one comforted. No one believed her. The comment section turned quickly. One woman wrote, "You didn't just burn your sister. You torched your own soul." Another said, "Funny how you always find a way to cry when someone else is bleeding." There were hundreds of responses, some from women who had been following the burn back, others from people Olivia used to work with. Stories started surfacing. Quiet complaints she'd buried. Comments she'd made behind closed doors. Co-workers who had been too afraid to speak now felt permission to say what they'd seen. And the brands, they didn't just stay away. They released statements confirming she would no longer be associated with any future campaigns. Her old modeling agency removed her profile entirely. She'd been blacklisted, not by any formal decree, but by the weight of collective truth. I didn't respond. I didn't make my own video. I didn't post rebuttals or rally supporters. I didn't have to. Because truth doesn't panic. It doesn't shout. It just waits, and it always arrives. Have you ever watched someone try to cry their way out of accountability? Have you ever seen the world finally stop clapping for someone who never deserved the applause? That video didn't save Olivia. It finished her. And this time, there were no second takes, no edits, No controlling the narrative. Just her own words exposed by her own performance. And all I had to do was keep building. She tried to come back. Of course she did. My mother had spent decades building her public image, and she believed in it the way some people believe in scripture. To her, reputation wasn't just currency, it was identity. So after weeks of silence, after the church letters and community whispers, she began quietly reaching out. No public statement. Just subtle feelers testing the waters. She called the director of the community center, left a voicemail offering to return as a volunteer if needed. She sent an email to the church board, writing that she hoped for a path toward reconciliation and renewed service. She even showed up at the library one afternoon during a children's reading hour, sitting in the back row like she belonged. But no one reached back. The community center replied formally, "Thank you for your interest. We are currently fully staffed." The church secretary, once her closest ally, didn't respond at all. And the pastor, he blocked her on Facebook. That more than anything shook her. Social rejection is one thing. Digital erasure is another. Word got around, not because people gossiped loudly, but because they no longer bothered to whisper. Elaine's trying to weasel her way back in, one woman said during a PTA meeting. "I used to think she was cold. Now I just think she's empty." Another added she didn't just lie. She let her kids suffer and called it discipline. For the first time, people weren't afraid to say what they really thought. And that more than anything else was her undoing. I didn't hear it from her directly, of course. I heard it from neighbors. From a cousin. From someone who saw her walking out of the church one afternoon alone, face pale, lips tight like she was holding something in. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. But for a woman who once held every room she entered, the sight of her being ignored, completely deliberately, was louder than any outburst. She tried applying to a part-time coordinator position at the senior center. They never called her back. She dropped by the Women's Guild meeting and was met with tight smiles and short nods. No seats were saved. No one offered her a pastry. It was exile by indifference. Have you ever watched someone try to step back into a room only to realize the door had already closed and no one was waiting on the other side? My mother didn't lose her place in the community because of me. She lost it because she finally stood in a spotlight she couldn't control. And when people really saw her, they realized the woman they admired had never truly existed. And I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just kept working. Because while she tried to reclaim power through proximity, I was building something that didn't need permission. It was late when the call came. Past midnight. The screen lit up with a number I hadn't saved, but I recognized it instantly. I stared at it for a long moment, thumb hovering over the red button. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let it ring into nothing. But another part, calm, detached, unshaken, wanted to hear what she had to say. Now that the world had stopped applauding. I answered. There was silence at first, just static and breathing. Then her voice, fragile, cracked, stripped of its usual venom. "It's me," she said. "Olivia." I didn't respond. I lost everything, she whispered. My job, my apartment. Everyone's turned on me. No one returns my calls. No one believes me anymore. I said nothing. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she continued, her voice breaking. "I was just angry. I didn't think you'd actually do it." My jaw clenched, but I stayed quiet. "I know I messed up," she said. "I know I hurt you. But I'm still your sister, Kelsey. We're still family." And that's when I finally spoke. "No," I said, my voice calm, firm. "You were family. And you lost that the moment you held a hot iron to my skin and smiled." She didn't answer right away. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "I lost everything." "No," I corrected her. "You lost everyone. There's a difference." I waited a beat, then I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear, because closure isn't something you get from the people who broke you. It's something you give yourself when you realize they can no longer reach you, not with their words, not with their guilt, not with their apologies wrapped in excuses. Have you ever been given the chance to forgive but realized you didn't need to? That moving on doesn't always require a conversation, just a boundary. That night I slept soundly. No flashbacks, no clenched fists, just breath steady, full mine. And the next morning I met Maya at our regular coffee spot. She sat across from me, scars still visible beneath her hoodie. She asked, "Do you think they ever regret it?" I took a sip of coffee and answered, "Maybe. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that we don't carry their regret. Only our own freedom." She nodded slowly like she was beginning to understand. And me, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't haunted. I wasn't even burned. I was fireproof. Maya was quiet that afternoon. We sat on a park bench near the river, the late autumn wind tugging at her sleeves. She kept her arms folded, not from the cold, but from instinct. Some habits are hard to break, especially the ones built from fear. She was 15 with wide eyes that had already seen too much, and the kind of silence that didn't come from shyness, but from survival. She stared ahead, not looking at me, and said, "Sometimes I think I'm still there. In that room. Like even though I got out, part of me didn't." I nodded. "Yeah, I used to feel that too." She turned, then just slightly, her eyes meeting mine for a brief second. "When did it stop?" "The feeling." "It didn't," I answered. "Not all at once. But one day I realized I wasn't scared of their voices anymore. And that's when I knew they didn't own my story." Maya looked down at her hands. There were faint scars, some old, some newer. But she didn't try to hide them from me. That alone was progress. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a sketchbook. "I draw sometimes," she mumbled. "It helps. I draw fire a lot. Not burning stuff, just fire." I smiled gently. "Me too." She blinked. "You do?" I leaned back, watching the branches sway above us. "Yeah. But not because it hurts, because it reminds me that no matter what they did, they didn't extinguish me. They tried to burn me down. But I became the thing they feared most, something they couldn't contain." Maya didn't say anything, but she opened her sketchbook and showed me a drawing. It was abstract lines, curves, red and orange and gold strokes. But in the center there was a small black shape surrounded by flame. Not consumed by it. Protected by it. "That's you," she said softly, in the middle. I felt something shift in me. Not pain. Not pride. Something older. Something deeper. The quiet understanding that all the hurt, all the scars had not been for nothing. Have you ever seen yourself in someone else's survival? Felt your own healing in the way they begin to rise? They tried to burn me alive. They called me worthless, a mistake, a parasite. But I didn't just survive. I built from it. I created something they could never understand. Truth Connection legacy. I became fireproof, and now I pass the spark forward. Carefully, gently. To girls like Maya, to women like me, to anyone who has ever been silenced and needs to know you are not alone. If this story stayed with you, I want you to remember one thing. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers, but from those who were supposed to protect us. And yet, even from that pain, we can rise. If you're a parent listening today, ask yourself, are you seeing all your children or just the one that shines? Don't wait until silence becomes the only voice left. Have you ever lived through something like this? Have you ever been hurt by someone close and found a way to heal? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear it. If this touched you, subscribe and share it forward. Because some truths once spoken help others breathe. Thank you for listening.